So, Baba Yaga and James, you follow the directions that Eric gave you and find yourselves at the coast. The sea is stormy and large gray waves crash into the cliff, sending spray into your face. You spot what looks like a natural path winding its way down the cliffside. At the bottom of the path, you find an entrance to a network of underground caves.
Yaga will enter the cave.
So as you walk into the tunnel, it very quickly begins to slope downwards. And when you first walked in, there was water lapping around your feet, not any higher than the tops of your shoes. But as you continue onwards and the tunnel slopes downwards, the water level is rising. And you reach a point in the tunnel where you realize you are going to need to swim through a submerged section if you want to proceed.
James will do it.
All right, then I need you to make a position check. You need a 5.
I don't like the water very much.
Oh, I didn't hit the thing for it.
Yaga does not like the water very much.
Okay.
She is small. The water is just deeper for her than other people. Have failed.
James will get ready to dive down. He will hold his breath as he slowly makes his way forward, as the sword clanks on the rocks underneath the water, and he will make it to the other side.
Okay.
I don't know if I can do this, but here we go. Ugh, it's all wet and gross. Seaweed washed up in here. And Baba Yaga holds her breath and dives under. About halfway through, she starts to panic when she can't see the other side. And she can't see where James went. It's dark. And she tries to swim to the surface and bumps her head against the rock that's there. And panics some more that there's no oxygen. She pushes herself backwards along the roof, using the rock to pull her forward back to the pool that she entered from. She is going to make a second attempt, but she is going to use magic.
Okay. What does she want to do with magic?
She's going to form a sphere of oxygen around her mouth.
You can do that for 1 Soma, and that'll give you a base of 4.
Okay.
So you need 1 more.
I knew I should have done this from the start, but there's the additional success.
Wonderful. Now tell me how you get through.
As she enters the water, the water's pushed away from her mouth, leaving her room to breathe. And she's able to sort of leisurely swim through without having to worry too much. And yeah, she makes a little underwater light for herself as well that travels with her under the water so she can see better. And that was 1 Soma, you said?
And James surfaced first and had a little bit more time than Baba Yaga to take in the surroundings and perhaps a little more time to figure out what to do about the 3 figures stumbling towards the 2 of you.
Once upon a time, a child saved the world of fairy tales. His reward was a wish. The one who plots in the shadows saw an opportunity to tarnish the child's heart, whispering words of corruption to him. The child asked the king of fairy tales to grant the villains, accursed for centuries, a new life. This was to be their chance for redemption. This was how the villains became good. But any light needs a shadow, and in turn, the heroes became evil. At that moment, all fairy tales were shattered.
They are hard to make out at first, but as they come closer, you see what looks like skeletons in ragged, waterlogged clothing with swords advancing upon you. And as they do so, the leader of the skeletons points at James specifically. Because I'm sorry, Kieran, but this adventure has a special agenda for these skeletons. They want revenge on Captain Hook. You killed their captain in a duel. They blame you for their ship sinking and their deaths.
Well, they will have their fight. James will draw his sword.
All right, and 3 skeleton pirates are advancing upon James when Baba Yaga also surfaces.
That was a lot harder than I thought. Not used to swimming. What are you doing?
What does it look like?
It looks like you're about to fight some skeletons. Have you tried talking to them?
We're settling our differences.
All right. And is James going to attack?
Yep.
All right. You need a 3. And you get a 3. So you can either simply succeed with some cost, or you can try and get an additional success to make it a straight up success.
Where's the fun in being safe?
Oh, well, you did it. So, there does not appear to be a leader as such of these lost souls of not long dead, because you killed them. You're not sure that there is a leader of these skeletons. They seem to all be acting with a very specific purpose, but no one is giving any orders. But the one that is closest to you is advancing and letting out sort of hissing sounds.
James will rush forward and take a slash directly at the spine, cutting it cleanly in two.
Baba Yaga may be disappointed to find the skeletons are not cats. However, there are 2 left, and does she wish to do anything?
I'm gonna say that she's still kind of in the water and
Okay.
damp. So she tries to light a bit of fire to throw at these skeletons, but it's not catching.
All right.
And that'll be the cost for my failure earlier.
Okay. The 2 remaining skeletons are stumbling towards you, and one of them manages to hiss out, "We will kill you, Hook." Before lunging at James, you need to make a defense check. You need a 3.
I failed.
You failed. Okay. Well, this skeleton perhaps was faster than you were anticipating, and it managed to lunge very fast, and its rusty sword manages to slash you across the shoulder, dealing 1 wound. The second skeleton, well, it also has a single-minded hatred for James' hook. It can't really get at him because there's another skeleton in its way, so it is going to rush at Baba Yaga. Chris, can you make a defense check? You also need a 3.
That is a failure.
Oh no. Please don't be killed by skeletons, people. Okay. So the second skeleton rushes at Baba Yaga, but it doesn't seem as hostile towards her as the first skeleton seems towards James. It isn't going to use its sword, however, it does plant a pretty firm kick in her chest, kicking her back into the water, and this does also deal 1 wound.
Okay.
Next, exchange player actions. Who would like
James
to
would
do
like-
something?
James would like to attack the one that hit him.
Okay, he can do so. He gets a 3 to start. He can try and get additional if he wants.
That's a success.
Wonderful. All right. Again, these things can only take 1 wound, so you are eliminating a skeleton. How is James going to do this?
James will toss his glove off to the side, revealing his hook. He will place his other hand on the forehead of, or I guess the forehead of the skull, and jam his hook in the skeleton's mouth and rip his lower jaw completely off.
And the skeleton, for a moment, stands still, and you think it's staring at you, although its sockets are empty, and then a pile of bones clatters to the stone in front of you. Baba Yaga.
Baba Yaga wants to try and use magic to force the bones of the other skeleton away from each other.
Magic gives you a base of 4, so you already succeed without a cost. It will be 1 soma, but you can do that.
Okay.
So what's it look like?
So Baba Yaga, kind of stunned, gets back up to her feet, kind of in the water, grabs onto the side of the pool and lifts herself out. Then she extends her hand towards the remaining skeleton, closes her eyes and concentrates for a moment. And all of the bones of the skeleton fly off in different directions as it is ripped apart by magic.
And Owl is now quiet except for a couple clattering, rattling sounds as some of the bones bounce and roll along the floor where they've been scattered. And you see no more skeletons. Well, you still see some bones, but they're not moving anymore.
James will sheath his sword and continue forward into the cave.
Okay, you're pressing onwards.
Baba Yaga will also press onwards.
Okay. You enter a cave whose floor is covered in a few inches of clear water. Small, colorful fish dart through it, and small crabs and other creatures scuttle through luminescent coral that fills the cave with a gently twinkling light. In the center of the floor is a circle of much deeper water, and from it rises a figure. Standing before you is a beautiful woman. Her skin is tinged blue, and both her hair and gown seem to be made of cascades of flowing water. She smiles and beckons you closer. Hello.
What manner of creature are you?
I am a sea fairy. What manner of creature are you?
It would seem that the story was correct, James, about the sea fairy.
It would appear that
I rarely receive visitors. What brings you to the center of the underground caves?
Well, the manor up atop has been attacked by a strange creature
A
that
manor?
contained shells from this cliffside.
A creature, you say. And she doesn't seem to know what manner you're talking about, but when you mention a creature, that was partially comprised of shells. She has a glimmer of recognition and looks, if anything, sad.
You are familiar with this creature?
I believe so, yes. If you are speaking of Enar.
We do not know who the name is, but I believe we have a similar understanding of what we are talking about.
Several years ago, I I was in the ocean, but I always am. I cannot leave it. I came across something very strange, a human heart. There was a man who had been thrown into the sea and left to die, but even while the fish ate away his flesh, he was kept alive by love. He loved truly, and that kept him alive. And I felt such pity for him. I only wished to help. And she looks slightly, not guilty, but as though her help did not go as planned, perhaps.
So, it was you who created the creature. Enar.
I infused his heart with new life. And his body began to regenerate, but I did not know. At first, it truly was love that kept him alive, but as he lay beneath the waves and slowly began to regrow his body, love turned to hatred and thoughts of revenge. And as his body began to regrow, it began to absorb everything around it, shells, seaweed, parts of an old shipwreck. It all fused together to create a new body. His heart is not even inside of this body. It still lies on the bottom of the sea.
I see. So this heart, that is the source of his reanimation?
Yes. While the heart still lives, even if his new body is destroyed, he will, as you say, regenerate.
It sounds like love keeping him alive was not a good thing. He must have gone through terrible pain.
I perhaps underestimated the human mind can be warped. It seems as though he was driven mad during the course of his body's regrowth. I I truly only wished to help.
Can you get the heart? It may be time that Inar is put to rest.
I will bring you Enar's heart if you do one thing.
Yes?
It was his love that kept him alive, at least at the start. Bring his love here so she may say goodbye, and then I believe he will truly rest in peace.
Do you know the name of his love?
I do not, but I know she is nearby, and I am sure you can discover her identity.
I have some theories, but I wanted to be sure. I'd say we have a deal. What do you think, James?
I believe that is a fair trade.
Then I shall see you soon. You need not meet me here exactly. I imagine it was difficult for you to find your way to this cave. I will meet you at the shore?
It was a little bit damp.
I suppose it is. And unless you have any further questions for her, she will sink back down into the deeper water and begin her journey to the bottom of the sea floor to fetch Enar's heart.
We will return back to the mansion.
Okay, before you return, however, we cut back to Piper and Iskra, who were making their way back, and they will arrive slightly before the two cliff goers. All right. So, Piper, tired from your long journey to the village and back, you arrive at the estate after the sun has set. You may have come determined to put an end to this mystery, but instead find a scene of chaos. Christian and Anderson are attempting to repair broken barricades, and the ground is a mess of mud, shells, and pieces of seaweed. You have arrived to the aftermath of Enar's attack of the mansion. Yarsi?
What do you mean? Are we there yet? Yes, we are. But I hardly see, Hamlin, why you're complaining, as you didn't walk a single step.
Iskra's sort of giggling at the argument between Piper and the mouse. She thinks this is very entertaining.
He will look around the place, taking in the damage and the scene in general. He will look at the two outside, and he will stroll by as he heads for the mansion.
Okay.
He will stop very briefly and spin on the spot. Oh, Niels was slightly wounded, but he's okay.
What do you mean?
I mean, he was wounded, but he's okay. Your companion, however, has been arrested for attempted murder. And he tips his hat and starts walking away.
Anderson looks a little shocked and is going to run after you. Sorry, I'm going to need you to explain yourself. Niels is wounded and Hans is arrested?
Yes.
Why?
Why is he wounded, or why is he arrested?
Whichever you feel like explaining first, I suppose.
Bullet wound. Right arm.
Why?
Hans. Gun. Bad shot at close range.
Why did Hans shoot Niels?
There was a secret.
And he looks very concerned.
And as all secrets, it was dark and cruel. But now, it's out in the light. When I left, Hans was sitting in a rather average office. The decor could have certainly used some work, even for a law enforcement building. Wasn't particularly imaginative, but I guess many of them aren't. However, he was singing like a little bird at dawn. He had many, many things that he wanted to tell them in order to not have a piece of rope put around his neck.
What secret? What do you mean?
I don't fully know. My interest wasn't quite in that, because I wasn't going to hang him. But however, the magistrate feels, with the overwhelming evidence that was there, that hanging him almost on the day was going to be justice. He was talking them out of that, trading the secret, or rather several secrets, about his time in the military, desertion, murder, all sorts of things, so that he would not be dangling and dancing at the end of the rope. I'm sure by now he's told them everything that he was willing to tell them.
So, you... No.
But Niels survived. The wound was not particularly good, but survivable. And the local doctor was sure that he would survive and was willing to testify in whatever the following proceedings were going to be.
Hans was never a particularly good shot.
I can attest for that. It was only about 3 feet away. Absolutely terrible.
I suppose that's what I get.
It is hard to get good help these days.
You are faster than I expected. I thought Hans had a bit more of a head start.
I think the problem is Hans is an idiot.
I suppose he is at that.
Now, I have no full understanding of what exactly it is he is trading for his life. My commanding officer, if you will, is one of the highest servants of God. So, I was here for the mess at your garden from the beast.
Einar.
I believe my compatriots have gone wandering into the wilderness in search of said beast.
They went to the cliff. They were looking for shells.
That does sound like them. Well, you're in good hands. They are quite capable.
Standing there looking stunned. But he's not denying anything you've said. In fact, anything you've said he has sort of confirmed. He does not seem to be in a particular mood to be covering up anything anymore. So if there is anything you are unclear on, now is your time.
Oh, see, I was playing it cagey. So Piper puts his cane into the grass and leans against it because he has impeccable balance. Eric, yours or the not quite deceased?
And he almost seems to choke on the word as though he can't quite get it out. Mine.
Which is why, in part, you brought the ballerina here.
I did not know that my sin had resulted in a child until I learned years later, and I have attempted to make amends. I love her while she tolerates me at this point for the sake of her son, our son, who I now love more than anything in this world.
You see, I would like to believe you. I would really like to believe you. But love is like the first rays of dawn, the gentle breeze of spring, the first scent of open flowers. It is not built upon murder, and he pokes him in his chest, nor is it built upon assault, sir.
And he slumps to his knees on the ground and begins sobbing. And he says, "You are right. I did I did not love her then. If I had loved her then, I would have let her be happy with who she loved, and I would never have hurt her. I did not love her. I wanted her. I love her now, but it is too late. I know it is too late to convince her I could be better. All I can do now is provide for her child, and that is what I will do unless I am killed by a creature I somehow caused."
Better you can be. However, I would not hold any delusions of any sort of relationship. What you have done, sir, is unforgivable. We ask soldiers to do many terrible things in the name of country and duty. You, however, dishonored all who wear the uniform.
And he cannot meet your gaze. But before he has the chance to reply, whether that be to admit that there is nothing he can really do to atone or to try and offer some defense of his actions, two things happen. James and Baba Yaga also arrive on the scene, and Eric runs from the mansion in tears. Now everyone's seen, reunited.
Did you have something to do with that?
When sorrows come, they come not single spies, but in battalions. Welcome, the two of you. While I have been busy, that sometimes shuts upon sorrow's eyes, steal me a while from mine own company. Yes, and I had nothing to do with this. Boy, not you, James. No, Hamlin, sit down, not you either, fool. What is it that ails you?
Eric is sniffling and looking confused, looking back and forth between Anderson, who he was coming to find, who is slumped on the ground, and you, who are standing there, not looking entirely defeated and miserable. So even though it was Anderson he came to find, he will answer Piper. "My mother is gone."
Well, that is going to be a bit of a problem.
Why? Outside of the obvious reasons.
Well, we found out the name of the creature.
Indeed. The meant-to-be-dead soldier, correct?
I suppose? Enar.
Yes. The soldier. The deserter, or at least accused of desertion.
It seems you've also been busy.
Eric is looking at all of you in confusion.
Enar would like the opportunity to say goodbye to...
You have spoken to him.
Not directly. We found the creature that created him.
Oh. Well. Interesting. And what is this creature that has created him?
It is a sea fairy.
A sea fairy.
It's kind of like a sea witch.
Is not a ferry a vessel that carts people from place to place? How did it create this individual?
It is a magical fairy.
A magical ferry. James, have you let Baba Yaga near the mushrooms again?
I'm afraid what she says is true.
I am still at a loss how a ferry can be responsible for creating the beast that has left this mess. Although technically, and he takes off his hat and hits Anderson with it, this is the beast responsible for creating this mess.
And Anderson lets out a strangled sob.
So how did this boat create this problem?
It's a person? It is a humanoid entity, not a boat.
You are not making any sense. You said a sea ferry.
It is a type of creature that shares a name with a sea vessel, but it itself is not a sea vessel.
Eric is approaching hysterics.
Child, where did you last see your mother?
When I came out here, and after I told you about the shells, she took me back inside, and she said that only she could stop the monster, and she had to go, and she told me not to worry because it wouldn't hurt her.
Well, she is right about that. It won't hurt her.
Are you so sure?
I believe so.
And Anderson, having heard this, has raised his head and looks up at Eric, and they are both quite in a state, and both are crying. And he is going to say to Eric, "You said those shells came from the cliff, yes?" And Eric nods, and Anderson gets to his feet, and he has changed from a sobbing mess into what at least appears to be someone with some sense of purpose, and he begins striding off towards the cliff.
I'm not sure that's an entirely good idea, do you?
Anderson, you're going to only make it worse.
I am going to go protect her, and you will not stop me.
I think I should stop him.
I hope you're talking about a more permanent solution.
Think we should kill him?
I never uttered those words.
And Piper will start playing a military tune upon his pipe as he wishes to create a descriptor.
Okay, what does he wish to create?
Obedience.
Okay, this is going to be Sanderson's opposition level. He does not wish to be stopped, so you're going to have to try and make him be... Okay, you need a 5. You can have a 3, because you're doing music, and that's your thing. Alright. So you succeed. What are you doing?
Stop. Come here, Anderson. I have very little patience for you, sir.
And he stops mid-step and turns to look at you with a sort of dazed expression, because he's not entirely sure why he's stopping when he very much wishes to be going somewhere else. And he will slowly walk back over to you.
Protect the boy with your life if need be.
You do not need to compel me to do that.
Clearly I did, as you're taking leave of what senses you have.
And he grits his teeth and puts a hand on Eric's shoulder, and he begins walking Eric back towards the house.
Come, you two, we haven't a moment to lose. And Piper starts taking off, and then he stops. Does someone want to show me where these bloody cliffs are?
James will lead the way then.
And as you reach the cliff, night has well and truly fallen. The storm from earlier has passed, and the sea seems still. The moon illuminates two figures on the edge of the cliff. The silhouette of Satu is graceful and poised, a stark contrast to Enar's hulking mass of flesh. For a moment, nothing moves as the two observe each other. Then tentacles of seaweed separate from Enar's body and stretch to encircle his lost love. Enar has begun attempting what is his ultimate goal in this form. He wishes to reunite with Satu, and what that means for him now is he wants to absorb her into his body.
I am not sure this is saying goodbye.
I don't believe so either.
I had hoped to be able to speak to the lady before this eventuality. That was not possible.
Satu, who had not really seemed concerned when you arrived, you know from Eric that she seemed convinced Enar would not hurt her, seems shaken, and you can see that she is attempting to break the ties of seaweed that are now wrapping around her, but Enar is quite determined and he is beginning to drag her closer to him.
I would like to play trying to get a descriptor.
Okay. If you want to try and impart a descriptor, you can. You need a 7.
I'm spending Soma.
Okay, go for it.
5 on top of my 3.
Okay, what descriptor are you trying to impart?
Compassion. Ina, there is a child. Robbing it of its mother will not bring her happiness. What you're doing is selfish.
At the mention of the child, the creature roars in what sounds like rage and redoubles its efforts.
What did you do, Baba Yaga?
I didn't do anything. You're the one who made it more enraged. This isn't the time, Piper. Baba Yaga's gonna try and talk to the creature.
Okay? What does she wish to say?
I know how hard it was for you all those years under the water, being eaten by those fish. Do you really want the same thing for your love?
As you speak, Enar's head turns towards you, and you get the sense that he can recognize and understand speech. He just does not care about anything you have to say.
James?
James will attempt to cut the seaweed that is pulling her in.
I was going to say, James? Iskra? Once more unto the breach, dear friends.
And Iskra's looking at you because she doesn't know what that means.
Charge! Save the girl! Slay the beast!
Okay. Iskra is going to dash forwards and begin biting at strands of seaweed. However, as many as she manages to rip through, more and more shoot out of Enar's body. What is James doing?
James will just attempt to stall it as long as he can by pulling on Siori back. And he was obviously
Satu?
Satu, sorry.
That's okay.
It was an S something, I knew that.
And as you reach out and touch Satu, the creature lets out a bellow of anger so loud that it shakes the cliff you are standing on. And you need to make... Actually, all 3 of you, I forgot this is a 3-pronged attack. All 3 of you need to make a defense check. Opposition level 7.
Yes! Ha ha! Success.
Succeeded? Okay.
Not perfectly, so...
That's okay.
Um,
So what Enar has done is he has shot out 3 large jagged shells from his body at the 3 of you. So Piper, we know, has gotten away from that. How have the other two fared before we get to descriptions?
I have failed.
I have
Have you?
also failed.
Okay, then the two of you are each going to be struck and take a wound. Piper is going to avoid doing so. How does this happen? What's it look like?
As the shell comes flying towards where the two of us are standing, Piper reacts extremely quickly with his very high agility and spins out of the way. However, it was across in front of Baba Yaga, who has less time to react, that when he has gotten out of her field of view, she can see there is a shell flying at her. He is a little bit off balance. He succeeded in dodging, but it wasn't his most graceful maneuver.
Baba Yaga raises her hands to try and deflect the shell, but because she saw it at the last moment, she didn't quite have time. And the shell smacks her right in the forehead, knocking her backwards and leaving a large gash across her face.
As James is trying to pull her away from the seaweed, the shell gets shot out straight into his leg as he falls to the ground and takes it out.
Okay, and Inar is continuing to drag Satu, who is struggling against the seaweed, but Inar is very strong and she is unable to break free. The sea fairy is down by the water's edge, and while it is difficult to hear over the sounds that Inar is making of mostly anger, you feel like you can hear her calling to you over the sound of the waves and the roars of the creature.
Yaga is going to get to her feet and run towards the cliff edge. She's going to try and get down to the water as quickly as possible. She will say to the sea fairy, Inar has not been cooperative. He is going to kill his love.
I fear he will do worse than that. He will make her a part of him. I did warn you, he is beyond any sort of cooperation. He was driven mad and now only exists because he is fueled by rage.
Why did you want this meeting then?
I did not want her to meet his body. I wished her to say goodbye to his heart.
Afraid it may be too late for that. Do you have the heart?
Yes.
And she holds out a heart which is pale and bloated and yet somehow pumping and encrusted in barnacles, but alive.
Baba Yaga will pull out a ornate dagger and move towards the heart. Then she will plunge the knife into the heart.
Sea Fairy does not look happy. She looks almost distraught, but determined. And as you plunge the dagger into the heart, a rush of seawater pours from it, and the heart itself turns black and shrivels and becomes dust that is blown away on a wind and lands in the sea. And Baba Yaga cannot see from where she is down at the bottom of the cliff, but for those of you up at the top of the cliffside, Inar suddenly stops. And he is no longer dragging Satu towards him. He is not roaring or attempting to lash out in anger at any of you. For a moment, the huge mass of him simply stands still. And then as James had seen it do before. The body dissolves into a rush of seawater which washes over the rock, leaving behind shells and splinters of wrecked ships and dead fish and seaweed. And it washes over Satu, who is now sitting on the rock wrapped in a pile of no longer moving seaweed. And Iskra has strings of seaweed in her mouth and she spits them out confused, as a minute ago they were writhing and alive and now they are simply strands of wet seaweed, and everything is once again still.
I'm sorry, Enar, you did not deserve this. But it was your fate, nonetheless.
Thank you for the compassion you have shown him, the fairy says.
I'm sorry we couldn't do more. His mind was too far gone.
I am sorry my attempt at mercy became this.
It didn't really. She came here of her own accord. Without us.
No, I meant giving new life to Inar's heart.
Yes, well, couldn't be helped. The compassion that you showed, it seems like that is in your nature.
Humans are more fragile than I expected. His mind could not stand what the body I created could.
You know, we could use someone like you.
I don't know what you mean.
Chris, how are we gonna get her there? She can't leave the water.
There's no one recruitable in this adventure. I cannot come with you. However, if you truly believe you could use my aid. And she, for a moment, dives back below the waves, and then she comes back holding something in her hands, which she holds out to you. It is a small horn that appears to have been made from a large conch shell, and she says, "If you are ever by salt water and do truly require my aid, play this and I shall be able to find you."
The Horn of the Sea Fairy. Thank you. I will keep this with me.
I suppose it is. And she laughs gently, and as you take it, she turns and begins descending back into the water.
Yaga will take the slow way back up the cliff.
Your first treasure, which are items you can get throughout adventures, which you do not technically own. They belong to the Order, but you may bring with you if required.
Satu?
She is kneeling on the rock with strands of seaweed that is now no longer constricting, but draped around her, and she seems to be in shock.
I must confess I lack a certain understanding of medicine.
And she looks at you with confusion. "I am not really hurt. I do not require."
I think physically you have healed. I think that mentally... I think the soul has never healed and is in need of restitution.
I did not think he would hurt me.
Clearly.
I thought I could. I don't know what I thought.
He was not the man he once was.
No. No. And she takes a deep breath and gets to her feet.
And Piper tries to not be too obvious about it, but he is making sure that the lady and the cliff are not too close proximity, since he doesn't really know what state of mind she's in.
He does begin walking, but away from the edge of the cliff, and she says, I need to find Eric.
Yes, there's something we need to discuss. I was hoping to have done this before all of this, but that was not possible.
And she looks at you.
And he searches for the most delicate way that he can find it. And he can't really come to a consensus in his own mind. So he simply says, I know everything. How you came to be here, the creature who was once the man. What happened, Eric, all of it.
And a look almost of relief washes over her face because while everything that you have revealed you know is painful and a source of shame for her, the fact that somebody knows, she seems almost surprised to find, is a relief in some way.
Now we need to decide what to do. The Yaga, I never know which way that particular creature is going to bounce. James, for a pirate, has been surprisingly upright. He could well like to take Anderson's head. You are the injured party. If there is justice to be done, it is for you, and not for society. Society is a concept. Harm and wrong was done to you. It is upon you on which course of action you would like to take. He can be punished to the full extent of the law, if that is your wish.
I do not know what I wish. That would upset Eric.
And while the past cannot be undone and the future is always in motion, what he did, inexcusable.
All that I want is to see Eric safe and happy, and were Anderson to lose his head, Eric sees the man as a father. He does not know that he is his father. I could not do that to him.
I will not lie, the idea of this individual having no consequence for the actions that he set in motion does not sit well with me.
Is there a consequence that sees him keep his head? At least I would not weep for him did he lose it, but I could not hurt Eric. And she is torn. You feel that if you pushed the matter, she could be swayed. She does not want revenge, but justice would be satisfying. She fears the effect Anderson's death would have on her son. And without him, she has nowhere to go.
Piper will walk towards the manor.
And Iskra, who has not really got a full grasp of the situation, is going to follow, and Satu, who wants to find Eric and certainly has no reason to remain on the sea cliff, will also follow.
James is going to make sure Baba Yaga gets back.
All right, and nobody prevents you from reaching the manor.
And Baba Yaga
I'm
and
gonna-
James will be following behind.
Okay. He is going to find Anderson.
Okay, Anderson and Eric are both sitting in sort of the main sitting room on the first floor. Both have been crying, and Anderson seems to have been mainly convincing Eric to not run out to the cliff himself because he was instructed to stay and protect Eric. So they are both there, and I don't know, Christians somewhere, and some servants are around. They're not the only two in this house. And Eric, seeing Satu, will leap up from the chair he has been sort of curled up in. When you entered, he had his arms wrapped around his knees, which were drawn up to his chest, and looked very distraught. And he will fling himself at Satu, who will pick him up and hug him tightly. And she is going to basically, her only drive for this scene is reassuring Eric that she is fine and they are fine and all will be fine. And she's off doing that with Eric. And Anderson, upon seeing all of you return, has a look of relief. He is happy that Satu is safe.
James would like to have a chat.
All right, who's James going to have a chat with? Anderson?
Yep. Is he sitting by a table?
Walked over and sat down in a chair, and he's just put his head in his hands. He's like, He kind of ruined his life 6 years ago. It's just catching up with him now.
James will sit across from him and take off his glove, revealing his hook. I would like to even our odds.
And he looks up at you.
He will hold his hook up to him. Put your hand on the table.
And he hesitates. But he sees a look of great determination in your eyes, and so he puts his hand on the table.
James will take a dagger out of his coat, and I want to use with a sword or with a smile.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
And what are you doing? Are you intimidating or impressing him?
Intimidating.
Okay.
As he sees me raise the dagger up and close his eyes, bracing for his hand to be cut off, I wish to stab it between his fingers, not hurting him.
And as he hears the dagger thud into the wood of the table, he flinches, and it takes him a moment to realize that it did not hit his flesh, and he will open his eyes and look at you in confusion.
If it were up to me, you would have lost that hand. And James will walk away.
Iskra never got a full understanding of the situation. She heard Piper talk with him, but because things were not said plainly in a way that like a 10-year-old is like, ah, yes, I understand. She knows that he did something bad. She does not know what, so she perhaps does not feel the same amount of anger towards him as the rest of the party. If anyone told her to bite him, she'd happily do so, but she is not going to go kill him of her own volition.
The Broken Tales RPG is released by the World Anvil Publishing, starring Ghost as Piper, SPG as James Henry Hook, Shadow as Baby Yaga, Emily is the Storyteller. Sounds and music by Syrinscape.com and Epidemicsound. You can find us at critfail.com.